So hello again, everybody. This time we will be talking about the continuation of our module on the self, holistic growth. More specifically, we will be talking about in more detail the 8 psychosocial stages of development of Erik Erikson. And we will also be discussing meeting life challenges in middle and late adolescence and the concept of self-awareness. When we talk about the different areas of personal development, we also want to consider the expected developmental tasks of adolescents, so that when we look at these areas of personal development, we can see if we are able to perform the developmental tasks that are expected of us at this stage. So what are the tasks that we need to consider? We develop and apply abstract thinking skills. We adjust to a sexually maturing body and the feelings that come along with it, the feelings that are that we also experience because of these sexually maturing characteristics. We develop stable and productive peer relationships, as these are quite important to us at this stage. We define a personal sense of identity. We need to be able, we are working towards this so that we can resolve the crisis that we are in at this developmental stage. We are able to meet the demands of increasingly mature roles and responsibilities, especially now that you are in your final year in senior high school and you are preparing for the next stage of your life, the next chapter of your life, which is college life. You need to be you are given tasks that can help you enhance your ability to accomplish more complex or more mature roles and responsibilities, to fulfill more mature roles and responsibilities. You also begin to renegotiate your relationships with your parents and your caregivers, because at this stage, you are expanding your interpersonal relationships to your friends, to those who are accompanying you in school and the outside community, the community outside of the home. You are also at this point, because of your cognitive development, able to adopt a personal value system. And this is also related to your moral and spiritual area of development. And finally, you're able to adjust to new physical sense of yourself, including your body image, right? So these are the developmental tasks that an adolescent faces. And these, as you can tell, cover the different areas of personal development that we have already discussed so far. So last time, we talked about the 8 psychosocial stages of development as proposed by Erik Erikson. And we said that we will be talking about these in more detail. We said that in each stage, there is a conflict that we need to resolve in order for us to obtain a virtue. No? And it is important that we are able to resolve one conflict at a time in each developmental stage, because as we progress to the later stages of development, the tasks become more complicated, the conflicts become more increasingly complex. So these 8 psychosocial stages are infancy, early childhood, preschool, school age, adolescence, young adulthood, middle adulthood, and maturity. And as you can see in the diagram, in each of this stage, there are different conflicts, which we will be discussing one by one. So when it comes to the infancy stage of psychosocial development, the conflict that you are faced with is trust versus mistrust, and it is hoped that you will obtain the basic virtue of hope once you're able to resolve this conflict. So the major question that goes through your mind, of course unconsciously, is, can I trust the people around me? And the important event that helps satisfy or that helps you resolve this conflict is the feeding, no? Because that is your basic need at this stage of development. Now, moving on to the next stage, which is the early childhood or early childhood stage of psychosocial development. The question that you begin to ask is, can I do it myself? Because the conflict that you are faced with is autonomy versus shame and doubt. All right, so you are trying to figure out if you are independent enough to do things on your own. Because you are worried that if you do things on your own, will you fail? And if you fail, you will experience shame, or you will begin to doubt yourself. Now, if you're able to resolve this conflict, the virtue that we hope to achieve in this stage is will. And the important event is developing your own preferences. So this may be in the choice of food, your clothes, your toys, and also a very important event is being able to master toilet training. Now, this is during the early childhood stage, and toilet training is a skill that helps us become more autonomous, become more independent, because we do not depend on our caring adults anymore or on other paraphernalia or apparatus such as the diaper. All right. So there. No? So this is the early childhood stage of psychosocial development. The next stage is preschool. And in this stage of psychosocial development, the conflict that we are faced with is initiative versus guilt. The major question that we ask is, am I good or am I bad? All right. So the important event, as you can see, is exploration and play. And in this exploration and play, if you're able to resolve your conflict, whether it is good to make an initiative or if you do something, if you initiate something, will you feel guilty about it? All right. The basic virtue that you can achieve if you are able to resolve the conflict is purpose, the virtue of purpose. And you are able to do this through exploration and through play. No? So that is what we are putting together here as we begin to understand the preschool stage of psychosocial development. So as you can see, in each stage, it is very important. You don't focus on a lot of virtues at the same time. No, it depends on the developmental stage that you're in. What happens if you crowd yourself with so many conflicts in one stage? No, it won't be beneficial to you. It can affect you negatively, especially in the future as you progress, as you move from one stage of psychosocial development to another. The next stage is the school age stage, and the conflict that you need to resolve at this stage is industry versus inferiority. What are the things that you are good at? No, what are the things that you are bad at that you need to improve? All right. And of course, if you're able to resolve this conflict, the basic virtue that you'll be achieving is competence. And the important event is school. Being able to go to school, participate in school. This is very important at this stage of psychosocial development. And of course, this is the stage that you are in, the adolescent stage of psychosocial development. The main conflict that you are faced with at this stage is identity versus role confusion. The major question that you're asking yourself at this stage is, who am I? Who am I? Who do I identify with? All right, that is your major question. And you are able to explore and find answers to this question through the important event, which is your social relationships, as we have been saying time and time again. And of course, the basic virtue that you can earn or that you can obtain if you're able to resolve this conflict is fidelity. All right? And being loyal to your friends is very important to you. That is why also, if something happens that destroys that loyalty, your fidelity to your friends or their fidelity to you, it is a big blow. No, it becomes a very traumatic experience for you at this stage of psychosocial development. Moving on to the young adulthood stage of psychosocial development, this is when we are mostly faced with the conflict of intimacy versus isolation. All right? And that is why it is only at this stage wherein we need to focus on the important event, which is romantic relationships. Please take note of that, no? In the previous stage, your important event is your social relationships and not romantic relationships. We are not expected to be exclusive at the adolescent stage, no? We need to be able to resolve first the identity and confusion conflict before we begin to consider being in a seriously committed relationship with another person who, if that person is also just an adolescent, is also still going through that conflict of identity versus confusion. So what will happen if you're both confused, right? So that is why it is important to be able to resolve these conflicts one stage, developmental stage at a time. And the major question for young adults are, will I be loved or will I be alone for the rest of my life? And of course, the basic virtue that you can obtain if you are able to resolve this conflict is love. All right? Now, as you progress and you move on to middle adulthood, the middle adulthood psychosocial stage of psychosocial development, the conflict that you're faced with is generativity versus stagnation. Am I still able to contribute to the world or am I just going to stagnate? When you stagnate, when there is stagnant water, it is not moving, it is not running, what happens? There will be mosquitoes. it will not be beneficial to the environment. So that is how you feel. Am I still able to generate something? Am I still able to contribute? Am I still able to am I still productive as an individual? Or will I just wither and die? Will I just stagnate? All right. Now the basic virtue that you can obtain if you're able to resolve this conflict is care. All right? Because if you know that you are caring for someone, you know that somebody else depends on you, then you will feel that you are being productive. You will feel that you are still able to contribute. And the important event, that's why the important event in this stage of psychosocial development is parenthood and work. All right? Because in work, you're also given responsibilities that you need to fulfill. You need to tasks that you need to accomplish. And then there is the stage of psychosocial development in maturity. And the conflict that you are faced with in this stage is integrity versus despair. The major question that you ask yourself is, did I live a meaningful life? Now, for those people, for those who are able to reach this stage of psychosocial development, of course, they are faced with this question, no? I am nearing the end. So, have I lived my life meaningfully? Was I able to fulfill the purpose for which I was created? And of course, the basic virtue that you can obtain in this stage is wisdom. And the important event that one must go through at this stage is being able to reflect back on life. There are a lot of mature individuals, those who reach this stage, who would rather busy themselves and do not take the time to reflect back on the life that they have lived. And that might mean that they are ignoring that important event which they need to go through, so that they can answer the question, did I live a meaningful life? And they can pass on the wisdom that they will earn after they have resolved that specific conflict. Now, as adolescents, we are faced with the different developmental tasks, the ones that we enumerated earlier. We are also faced with different challenges, no? And these challenges come with the developmental changes that we are experiencing. So let us try to understand more what these challenges are and what can we do in order to overcome them. What are the challenges that you experience as an adolescent? Conflict in relationships, having an ideal concept of yourself, being able to engage with others, experiencing overwhelming feelings and emotions, and of course, your hormonal changes. These last two are related to one another. The reason why you are always overwhelmed with your feelings and your emotions because of your hormonal changes, because that accompany your growth, your development. And because you will have these overwhelming feelings and emotions, that affects how you engage with others. And sometimes it might result to conflict in relationships. And also it might result to having a poor concept of yourself. So these are some challenges that adolescents will experience. What are the major challenges that can stem from these challenges that we earlier indicated? Problems in or issues in your self-esteem, your physical appearance, group belongingness, your relationships, your sexuality. When we talk about sexuality, we're talking about if you are female, how you relate with other females, how feminine are you, or also how masculine are you. If you are male, how you relate with other males, or how you relate with the opposite sex, or how you relate with older people, with people of authority, with people who are younger than you. That is part of your sexuality. How you think, how you carry yourself, how you behave, how you project yourself. That is part of your sexuality. All right? It comes from your being a woman or your being a man. All right? How you were born. What is your purpose as a woman? What is your purpose as a man? And how do you in turn live out that femininity or that masculinity, that sexuality that you alone possess? All right. Now, also, major challenge in this stage is your academic concerns. Of course, this is a major challenge because this is a time wherein you are preparing yourself for much more complex responsibilities as you move from high school to college. And when you go to college, this is already actually from senior high. You're also already preparing for your career, for your future. That's why academics are always going to be a concern, because the next bullet point is we are trying to choose the right course and career path for us. At this stage, you are also influenced by socio-economic challenges. This already concerns you. Do we have enough budget for me to go to this particular school when it comes to getting a college degree? Will I be able to afford this education, this training, this enrichment that I need in order to fulfill the career path that I would like to take? All right, so those are challenges that commonly adolescents encounter. We will not be able to meet these challenges properly if we are not aware of who we are. So we should be able to meet these challenges through self-awareness, through better self-awareness. What does that mean? What is self-awareness? Self-awareness is being able to understand myself, my capacity, my strengths, and my weaknesses. Self-awareness is also being able to grow in mind, body, and spirit. Being able to know in which areas I need to develop further, which areas I need to improve. And that is why we have been discussing all this time the different areas of personal development. And specifically in the adolescent stage, what am I experiencing in these areas of personal development? Of course, all of these areas are being experienced by people all across the lifespan, no, in different developmental stages. But what we discussed in what we are discussing in our lessons, in our modules, is specifically what are we experiencing as adolescents in these areas of personal development, so that we can review and we can also reflect on what our strengths and weaknesses are and how we can further grow, how we can further improve. Now, when we talk about self-awareness, we can look at different theories to approaching self-awareness. Here are familiar names that we discussed in earlier modules: Sigmund Freud, Alfred Adler, and Carl Jung. Sigmund Freud had, if we can recall, proposed his psychoanalytic theory. And he said that there are 3 levels of awareness, which is the conscious, the subconscious or preconscious, and the unconscious. He also said that there are 3 provinces of the mind: the id, the ego, and the superego. It was Sigmund Freud who talked about the slip of the tongue. If you can recall, we said that Sigmund Freud focused on the unconscious childhood experiences and specifically our basic sexual instincts. He said that we are motivated. Our personality is formed because of these, our unconscious, what lies in our unconscious, our childhood experiences, and our basic sexual instincts. And he said that when the slip of the tongue happens, or they use it now, they call it now as the Freudian slip. This is when we unconsciously say something that we did not mean to say. But he says that most probably it is because that is what we actually meant to say in the first place. It was there in our unconscious. And it just came out because it was just waiting to come out. All right. So, if you can tell, a lot of people contested these ideas from Sigmund Freud because that meant that they did not have any control for their own thoughts and their actions. Alfred Adler, if you can recall, talked about the inferiority complex. He's known for this. He introduced this. He said that all of us are striving for superiority, which means we are striving for success. And he said that we are all motivated by our social interest to be one with humanity. So for Alfred Adler, we all have a standard to either have social interest or a lack thereof, which he calls maladjustments. If we have social interest, that means we have that desire to be one with humanity. But if we have maladjustments, that means we choose behavior that result in a lack of social interest, a lack of interest in being one with humanity, a lack of interest in our own personal growth. Alfred Adler believed that since we either have social interest or maladjustments, we also create safeguarding tendencies. These are patterns of behavior that protect ourselves from public disgrace. If ever the things that we do, we feel that the things that we do are not acceptable to others, are not acceptable to society, and it can affect our self-image or our self-esteem. So this is all focused on our desire to be superior, all right, to overcome our own inferiority complex. And this is a very how shall I put it, being able to go through this process is also very humbling. If you can tell, no, if we are to approach self-awareness through this process that Alfred Adler is proposing, you really have to look into yourself, your motivations, and are you able to overcome your own inferiorities? Are you able to achieve success? And what is your motivation behind it? When we talk about Carl Jung, we talk about the psychospiritual dimension of self. He said that we all have a personal unconscious and a collective unconscious, but he also spoke about individuation, which is our extension of our consciousness in order to develop our personality. Okay, so this is going beyond the unconscious and extending into our consciousness to develop our personality, to become more self-aware, to realize the things that we need to work on. And he said that the aim of individuation is to rid ourselves of our archetypes, of these archetypes that we use as a mask to confront the world. All right, so Carl Jung suggests that we go beyond our unconscious, we individuate, we realize who we really are by getting rid of this collective unconscious that we hide behind. All right, so later we will look further into these things that we have briefly discussed about these different theories approaching to self-awareness. So as we described earlier, Sigmund Freud came up with the psychoanalytic theory. Further, he said that the mind has 3 levels of awareness: the conscious, the subconscious or preconscious, and the unconscious, and 3 provinces, which are the id, the ego, and the superego. And we also discussed about the Freudian slip earlier. Now, this is his illustration about the mind, that there are 3 different levels: the unconscious, the preconscious, and the conscious. Of course, the conscious is just the tip of the iceberg, he says. The conscious is what everybody sees, what we also know. But underneath the conscious mind, under the sea level, is a little part, a layer, which is called the preconscious mind. So the things that are here are about to enter the conscious mind, but still not readily available to our consciousness. But what we don't see, which is the bigger part of that iceberg, is the unconscious mind. And that is what Freud is saying. There is so much more in our unconscious mind that we are keeping there, that is not readily available to us, and it might come out, and somehow it largely influences our personality, our motivations. And of course, like I said, we have no control of what is in the unconscious mind, and sometimes we also have no control if it will just come out through what he says is the slip of the tongue, or the Freudian slip. And of course, Freud also talked about 3 provinces of the mind. No, these are not levels; these are provinces. This is who is speaking at that particular moment. So that's the id, the ego, and the superego. He said the id is our instinct; it's our basic instinct. The id, as illustrated, will tell you that I need to eat right at this very second. But the superego, which is the morality, will tell you that you can't do that because you're in the middle of an important meeting. You can't just go out and eat All right? And it is the ego, the reality, who will balance what the id and the superego is saying and determine which is more applicable in the real situation at that specific moment. All right? So there should be a balance of the id and the superego. All right? And that would be the ego. Now, we talked about Alfred Adler earlier, and we talked about the inferiority complex and our strive for superiority. We talked about the level of social interest that we have, or the lack thereof, which is our maladjustments. And we also said that we have these safeguarding tendencies, or what Freud might call as defense mechanisms, which which become our excuses to our limitations. And sometimes it also is manifested in aggression. All right. Carl Jung, as we also said, focuses on the psychospiritual dimension. And we talked about the different archetypes that we unconsciously hide behind. And what are these archetypes? Jung had talked about 4 major archetypes, and these are the self, the shadow, the persona, and the anima or animus. All right? So again, that's the self, the shadow, the persona, the anima, or the animus. Now, the persona is the side of our personality that we show to the world. This is the first major Jungian archetype. The shadow represents the qualities that we consider negative and we attempt to hide from the world. And then the self is the most comprehensive of archetypes because it unites the other archetypes and represents the strivings for completeness and perfection. So it tries to unite all of these archetypes that we sometimes adhere to, that we sometimes hide behind also. And then the anima or the animus, the anima is the feminine side of men, believed to be responsible for irrational moods and feelings, while the animus is the masculine side of women, believed to be responsible for also irrational thinking naman and illogical opinions. Okay, so this is if you are a man, the opposite, your opposite characteristics, your feminine side, and if you're a woman, your masculine side. Now, when you are talking about self-awareness, and we asked earlier, what is self-awareness? Self-awareness gives us a more secure inner self-knowledge. As you grow and you develop, it is hoped that you are increasing in your self-awareness. It helps us communicate clearly and effectively. It allows us to express our feelings confidently. It lessens our confusion and helps straighten out misunderstandings and misinterpretations. And it can lead to honest, real, and respectful relationships with others because you are more sure of yourself. And it gives you an opportunity, because of that, it gives you an opportunity to grow beyond yourself and to become a more positive presence to others. Your social relationships become more positive, you become more positive, and you create a more positive contribution to the people around you, to your environment. So why are we discussing all of these, no? We discussed the challenges that you face as an adolescent, the tasks that you need to accomplish, and we also discussed that you need to grow in your self-awareness. The reason why we are discussing all of these areas of personal development is because it can give us a better idea of what our limitations, what our strengths are. And the reason why we discuss the different theories approaching to self-awareness is so that we can look at these theories and see how we can improve on our self-awareness. The goal is to be able to challenge yourself so that you can move out of your comfort zone. Because out of that comfort zone is where the magic happens. You will not be able to discover more about yourself if you do not go out of your comfort zone. And most of the time, people do not want to discover what their strengths are, because that means they will also discover what their weaknesses are, and they might not like it. All right? But as we have learned, it's important to know both so that you know what you can improve on. No, there should be a balance always of what you can further enrich and what you can improve on. So as we close this lecture, let us reflect on the following. As I reflect on and become more aware of my own strengths and weaknesses, what do I consider more important when it comes to decision making? What is popular among my peers, media, or social media? Or the values and virtues that I have come to learn from caring adults and mentors? Most of the time, when we reflect on ourselves and we see what our strengths and weaknesses are, it would also help if we try to understand what influenced us. How come these are our strengths? How come these are our weaknesses? And how can we use this, knowing what our influences are, how can we use this to make better decisions in the future? As we said, the more that we are discovering ourselves, the more that we are learning and maturing, the more that we can become better in decision making, in making decisions that can affect our future, life-changing decisions. So it's good for us to understand what motivates me to make these decisions, what influences me, and knowing that, how can I make it better? How can I improve? So we have reached the end of this lecture, and I hope that you're able to understand why it's important to discuss these things, to better understand ourselves and to better see what areas we need to improve on. All of these theories, all of these areas of personal development, all of these things that we have discussed and learned will not be important if we will not use this to our own benefit, no? If we do not apply this in our own lives. The reason why we are studying these things is so that we can develop further as an individual and we can reach our full potential. As a final note, let us remember, self-confidence is more secure when it rests on knowing we are God's beloved children, and not on the certitude of attaining a success that often eludes us. This conviction enables us to accept the risk involved in any decision, to overcome the paralysis of insecurity, and to be open to new situations. I hope that this lecture will be able to help. Thank you for listening. God bless.